Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to my video on the Mantikora nerf and also the new card we're getting this month. Now the Mantikora nerf was actually part of a bigger patch which had mostly just bug fixes in it and also couple rarity shifts. So I'll link the sort of post they did on it in the description, so go check that out. It's mostly just rarity shifting and also a change to Wamasu. The 8-drop blue creature, where it can only hit creatures now, not the face, which means you can't just go shackle, shackle, attack, 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 and then Wamasu and lightning bolts to the face constantly in arena. So most of the patch was arena based. I don't think it makes that much of a difference. I think blue's a bit weaker, I think green's about the same, and I think red is still bad. So that's kind of my brief overview on that, but as I said, I'll link it in the description. However, on to the meat of the patch. We got a nerf to Mantikora. So Mantikora is now a 10 mana 6/6 with guard, and when you summon it, destroy an enemy creature in this lane. It used to be any enemy creature, which meant you could play Mantikora in one lane in front of the small stuff, use its ability to kill the big thing, and lock down the entire board at once. You can't do that now, which is actually a very, very big deal, because Control Mage was arguably the strongest deck. Not by a lot, but it was arguably the strongest deck. It was one of the reasons why Archer was so popular in the last couple of days, because Archer was favored against the control decks, and it's also the reason why Scout has dropped a lot, because Scout has issues with Manticore, because Manticore deals with literally everything, apart from really random stuff like Tazcad. But even then, you deal with the Tazcad, and then you got a 4/4 against a 6/6, so it kind of deals with that as well. However, now you can play around Manticore. You put your threats in two separate lanes, and they can only deal with one lane. And because Mantikora costs 10 mana, that's actually a really big nerf, especially for Control Mage, because if you're playing a deck that uses Mantikora as sort of a big 2-for-1 later on in the game, but the rest of your strategy is also creature based, then that's fine, because you can use Mantikora later in the game and use it as a 2-for-1 when you're both in top deck mode and you want to build up a board and then sort of attack with them. Sort of a maybe Spell Sword control type of deck. I mean, Spell Sword generally goes for either tokens or in my case mid-range, but I have seen some control lists, and Manticore probably still work there, although it's obviously still weaker. What about other decks that may want to do that? Like, we could see maybe a slower Monk. Unlikely, but possible. Or a slower Crusader, something like that. We could see some sort of slower control deck in yellow that can still use Mantikora. However, Control Mage uses Mantikora slightly differently. They don't use it as a 2-for-1 for a lot of cases. I mean, that's how it plays out, but they don't really use it for that. They use it as a method of locking down the board so that they can start crawling back their tempo disadvantage that they normally have. They also use cards like Ice Storm to do that. So Manticore could deal with the big stuff, and Ice Storm dealt with the small stuff, and it was sort of a 1-2 punch that allowed you to just stabilize out and just stop taking damage, and then you win the game. But now you can't really do that, because if you have two 5/5s in play, you put one in each lane, they can only deal with one, and then they got a Manticore sitting opposite an empty lane, and then they take 5. Whereas before, they could play the Manticore in front of the 5/5, take out the other 5/5, and take 0 damage. So this is a really, really big deal. And something I do want to talk about actually is from a Spell Sword player's perspective, since that's the main deck I play nowadays. The deck I was playing had some serious issues with Mantikora, like some serious ones. It would basically lock down the entire board state. However, now, if you just play a couple different mid-rangey creatures across the board, they're going to have some serious issues at turn 10. Because they won't die to Ice Storm, so they have to do individual single target removal, and Mantikora will only deal with one threat because you can just ignore it. So I think this is actually a substantial hit for Control Mage. A lot larger than it looks, in my opinion. How much will it drop? Well, I'm going to say it's going to drop to tier 2. Right now, the metagame is fluctuating so much, it's kind of hard to say. Control Mage was tier 1. Archer kind of increased. But I'd say Control Mage was very, very good. It was arguably the best deck. Then you had Scout was also up there, Archer's also up there, and then you've got the sort of blurry line between tier 1 and tier 2 where you also have Spell Sword, you've got Monk, just some other random decks like Sorcerer. There was one guy playing Sorcerer in top 10. So you got some pretty diverse decks that you can pick right now, and I think Mantikora's nerf will bring Control Mage down to maybe the middle of the pack. Yeah, probably in the middle of the pack instead of the top of the pack. And what's going to substitute it? Good question. Maybe Scout? I mean, Scout's worst matchup was Control Mage, right? I mean, any Scout players can probably chime in there, but from what I've heard, Scout had some serious issues with Control Mage, which does make sense. So I guess Scout's going to get a little bit stronger again, and then Control Mage is going to drop a bit, and probably Archer might drop a little bit since it's sort of prey that it likes hunting is also dropping, and then Spell Sword will probably go up a little bit, but not by a lot. I think that's probably the way those are going to go. As far as Monk goes, and Sorcerer and such, and Assassin, I actually have no idea because I don't really know those matchups. But in terms of those 4 decks, I think that's how it's going to sort of reorientate itself. So that's half of the patch. Now, when the season ends, which is tomorrow, we're getting a new card. Now, what is this new card? This new card is Hist Grove. Now, I talked about this on stream a while ago, but I haven't really made a video on it. So, what is Hist Grove? 3 mana support, epic, and when you summon it, it gives you +1 max magicka, and when you have 15 or more, you sacrifice it to make 2 8/8 Swamp Leviathans. Now, they are just vanilla creatures, by the way. So, what do I think of this guy? It's an interesting card. So let's have a look at something comparable. So this is obviously going to go in Scout Ramp. I mean, there might actually be enough ramp where you don't even need to play green anymore. It'd be kind of funny, actually. I don't think there's going to be another ramp deck outside of Scout. There might be, but I'm trying to figure out what else you could really ramp into, because Scout gives you a lot of extra stuff in green as far as defense goes in the early game. So I'm not entirely sure on that one. I guess maybe you've got enough ramp for, say, a Spell Sword ramp deck. Nah, Mantikora just got hit. No, I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, so Scout ramp. That's where this is going. So what's this comparable to? Well, let's have a look at the 3 mana card which they were playing. Well, okay, some of them were. Treeminder. Now, Treeminder is a 1/1 with Guard in addition to its +1 magicka. So what you're debating here is what is better, a 1/1 with Guard or a late game power punch. And let's just understand this ability here. It is extremely late game. Keep in mind, the only way you can actually increase above 12 is when you already have 12 and then you play a ramp spell or creature. Then you go up to 13, 14, 15. So you need to play 3 ramp creatures after you hit 12. Keeping in mind, you'll probably play 2 or 3 before you hit 12. So if you have 3 Hist Groves and then 3 Hist Miners and... let's see, what other ramp is there? We've got the 4-drop ramp in the 2 colors. One of the reasons why I feel like I'm missing something here. No. Trying to figure out like what exactly do we have in terms of ramp. So we've got Hist Speaker. There's 1. That's temporary, but it's all you need because you only need to get up to 15. So there's Hist Speaker, there's Treeminder, there's Hist Grove in purple. I think that's everything in just straight purple, and then there's also the multicolored card. That I appear to be missing right now. There it is. Thorn Hist Mage. So that's your options. It's one of the reasons you have to play green actually is because Hist Mage is so good. But so ultimately you could maximum. You're probably not going to run Treeminder. So you've got, what, 9 ramp in the deck now? And you're probably going to play 3 before, so you need to draw 6 just to get it to go off ever. That is going to be a problem, I think. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure how reliably you can get that to go off. And this does feed into it, because... so, what matchups are you going to be able to get it to go off in? Versus Control, it has to be a slow deck. So maybe the Mirror, maybe. I don't know, but maybe the Mirror, and definitely versus Control Mage. Now keep in mind, Control Mage just got slightly weaker. So it works versus Control Mage. What does it not work against? Literally everything else, because you need to get to 15 max magicka, and that just doesn't happen against the others. In fact, I think the most I've seen realistically whenever I've played against the deck is 14, and I'm playing a slower deck compared to some of the other decks. So if you're playing Assassin or Tokens or Archer or I mean, any of the Battle Mage decks, or even Sorcerer, I think, is probably too quick. Like, I'm not even sure if there's, outside of Control Mage and the Mirror, I don't know if there's another deck in the game that's slow enough for Hist Grove to actually go off. And that's a really big deal, because it means, is a 1-1 with Guard relevant? Not massively. Is it greater than 0? Yes. And that's the main thing to look at it, because I'm a little skeptic of how often this is going to go off. Now, what could you do to try and guarantee this going off? Well, let's see. So in terms of win conditions, what were we looking at? Blood Magic Lord, Nahaglyph, Iron Atronach, some running Bone Colossus, but yeah, it was mostly those three out of black, and then we also had in green Tazcad, so, and then also Odoving. So those are the main ones. So the real question is, can you effectively cut any of those by adding the Hist Grove? Maybe. The reason I say maybe is because you've got to keep in mind, this is a ramp spell. However, it's also a win condition. So it can function as both. So, if you can, instead of cutting ramp spells for Hist Grove, you cut some of your win conditions for Hist Grove. Again, I'm just spitballing here. If you cut some of your win conditions for Hist Grove, you end up with, or Hist Grove, you end up with more ramp, which is more likely to get this to go off. Is that enough? Here's the problem. So, chances are you'll maybe play 4 ramps before you hit 15. Or, no, not 4, 5. It has to be 5 at least. Sometimes 6. But anyway, you'll hit probably 3 before 12 regularly, and 3 after. So you hit 3 before 12 if you're playing the extra ramps. So as a result, you can hit this about 3 turns after you would normally be able to, say, play a 11 mana combination, since you'll be running a little bit of extra ramp. Now, here's the problem. You get the 2 8/8s, but the 8/8s are just stats, basically. It's just 16/16 worth of stats. They don't actually offer you any defensive outlets. So for 11 mana, instead of going for your sort of Swamp Leviathans, you could play a Blood Magic Lord and whatever you get off it. Or you could have played an Iron Atronach and just end the game anyway, and that also gives you Guard in the lane. Or Odoving, or something like that, instead of fiddling around with the different types of ramp. You could play Odoving or Atronach maybe 1 turn earlier. And is that enough? Probably, actually, because they have defensive options built into them. It's one of the reasons why these separate win conditions actually see play, is because they win the game, but they all have some form of defense, the main ones. Let's look at them. So Iron Atronach has Guard on it, and can't be targeted. Nahaglyph has Guard and can't be targeted. Blood Magic Lord gives you something immediately that you can use, and you've got a 5/5 Guard there, you've got Shackle, things like that. Tazcad deals with something immediately, and Odoving wipes the board. All of them have some method of defense inbuilt, which is actually a very big deal when you're trying to ramp into a big win condition. Whereas with Hist Grove, yes, you don't have to spend a bunch of mana for it, you're only spending 3 mana, but can you really cut the other win conditions to replace it? Maybe not. Now, what's the upside? The upside is, as just mentioned, it only takes 3 mana, which means that you play it, and then you get to 15, you get your 2 8/8s, and then you can play an Odoving on top, and then you win. That's the upside. So, in reality, I think that this card will see some play, but what I wouldn't be surprised by is if maybe the Scout decks cut 1 win condition, just 1, I don't know which one, depends on the list obviously. I wouldn't be surprised if they cut 1 late game card, and then cut, say, Tree Minders if they're playing them or something like that, and then added Hist Groves and sort of used them as a dual nature ramp win condition card, and maybe that works. Do I think it's good enough? Not sure. Because you really need to be in a certain metagame that allows you to use 15 max Magicka, which is very, very rare. You need a control metagame, and control mage just got nerfed. So that's kind of my my little segment on Hist Grove. I think it's a little too slow, but I don't think it's without potential. I think the card is pretty good. I'm not sure if it's good enough, though, and that's pretty much what I have to say on it. So anyway, that's my my mini patch review. This is actually all. Well, the Manticore nerf has already gone live, but the Hist Grove will be coming out tomorrow, so I might fiddle around with it a bit tomorrow, but we shall see. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback or want to ask me any questions, put it in the comment section below. But as now, it's been Jotto, signing off.